Hey everyone, thank you for being here with me today. I never imagined I would share this story, but sometimes the quietest moments reveal the most about the people we think we know best. It started with something as simple as a coffee chat on a warm afternoon in our quiet neighborhood here in Indiana, right at the beginning of the 4th of July break. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 30 years old. I work as a community program coordinator at the local nonprofit that supports families in our area, the kind of job where you spend your days helping people find balance and support in their lives, yet I had spent years quietly navigating the invisible imbalances in my own. That particular afternoon, I met my younger sister at the small coffee shop just a few blocks from our neighborhood homes. The place had that familiar hum of summer conversations, iced lattes, and the faint scent of fresh pastries. My younger sister and I had always tried to keep these catch ups light, the sort of sibling ritual that looked warm from the outside. I arrived first, claiming a corner table by the window where the sunlight filtered through the trees lining the street. When she walked in, she gave me her usual quick hug, the one that felt more like habit than affection these days. She ordered her usual oat milk cappuccino and settled across from me with a bright smile that did not quite reach her eyes. We started with the easy things, the way we always did, talking about the neighborhood block party plans and how the kids down the street were already setting off early fireworks in their backyards. But then, as these chats often did lately, the conversation drifted toward my husband and the subtle ways he had been framing our family life. My younger sister mentioned in that casual tone she had perfected how my husband had been telling her about the latest project at his job, how organized and forward thinking he was. She added almost as an afterthought that it must be nice for him to have someone like me who was so steady and low key, someone who did not need constant attention or praise. The words landed softly, but they carried that familiar sting of comparison I had grown used to over the years. My husband had a way of making those comments sound like compliments when he said them directly to me. Yet when they came through my younger sister, they always highlighted what I supposedly lacked compared to her more outgoing, visibly accomplished style. I sipped my coffee and kept my voice even, the way I had learned to do in my work when helping families sort through their own unspoken tensions. I told her I appreciated how my husband valued stability, but I also shared how it sometimes felt like the comparisons were becoming a quiet pattern, one that left me feeling unseen in my own home. My younger sister laughed lightly and waved it off, saying that was just how my husband showed he cared, how he pushed everyone to be their best. She pulled out her phone to show me a recent photo from our last family dinner, the one where we all looked perfectly put together for the camera. She said we looked like the ideal unit scrolling through the images she had posted online with captions about sisterly bonds and supportive marriages. That was the core of it, the thing we never named out loud. The careful image my husband and my younger sister worked together to maintain this polished picture of family unity that hid the small, persistent ways they positioned me as the one who needed fixing or quieting. The chat flowed on for another 20 minutes, moving to lighter topics like the upcoming holiday weekend and whether we would all gather at our parents' house for the traditional cookout. I felt the familiar pull of trying to keep things harmonious, the invisible dynamic, where any hint of discomfort from me was smoothed over with a gentle redirection. My younger sister's phone buzzed on the table a couple of times, but she ignored it until one notification made her glance down and frown slightly. She picked it up, tapped a few times, and then her expression shifted in a way I could not quite read. Without thinking, she turned the screen toward me for a second, muttering something about how my husband was always so thoughtful with his group messages to the family chat. I caught only a glimpse of the preview text before she pulled it back, but those few words lingered in the air between us like an unintended crack in the facade. It was a message from my husband to the small family group that included my younger sister, my parents, and a couple of close relatives. The preview read something along the lines of how he appreciated my younger sister's energy and ideas for the holiday, how she always brought that spark that kept things lively, unlike some people who tended to keep things too quiet and low effort. The words were not cruel on the surface, but in context, with the constant comparisons I had been hearing for months, they carried the weight of that invisible power dynamic my husband had been weaving into our marriage and our family interactions. My younger sister quickly locked the phone and changed the subject, laughing it off as my husband, just being himself, always trying to keep the family motivated, but the slip had happened. And in that moment, the coffee chat turned from casual sibling time into the first clear window I had into how my husband and my younger sister were shaping the narrative of our family life together. I drove home that afternoon with the windows down, the warm Indiana breeze carrying the distant pop of early fireworks. The neighborhood looked the same as always, quiet streets lined with well-kept lawns and American flags already waving from porches in anticipation of the holiday. My husband was in the garage when I pulled in, tinkering with the grill he planned to use for our small evening gathering on the patio later that week. He greeted me with his usual warm smile, the one that had drawn me in years ago, and asked how the coffee with my younger sister went. I kept my answer light, mentioning only the surface details, but inside I felt the first quiet shift, the peaceful recognition that something deeper was at play in the way he and my younger sister aligned to frame me as the steady but less exciting one in our little circle. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the neighborhood filled with the soft glow of string lights and the occasional burst of color from distant fireworks, we sat on our back patio for what was supposed to be a relaxed family talk. My parents had stopped by briefly to drop off some extra chairs for the upcoming break gatherings, and my younger sister had texted that she might swing by after her errands. The patio was my favorite spot in our quiet home, with its simple wooden furniture and the view of the backyard where fireflies were just starting to appear. My husband had opened a couple of cold drinks and was talking about how nice it was to have this time together as a family unit, how important it was to present a united front to the neighbors and everyone online. He glanced at me and added in that reflective way he had that my younger sister always had such great ideas for making things more engaging, while I was the reliable one who kept everything running smoothly in the background. The comparison landed again soft but pointed, the kind that made me feel both necessary and somehow lesser at the same time. My mother nodded along, commenting on how wonderful it was that my husband and my younger sister were so in sync with planning the holiday events. My father chuckled and said it was good to see the family pulling together like this. I sat there listening, the calm surface of the evening hiding the growing awareness that this was the pattern, the invisible dynamic, where my husband used my younger sister as the bright contrast to my more measured presence. The patio talk drifted into suggestions for the 4th of July activities with my husband and my younger sister, texting back and forth even though she was not there yet, their messages popping up on his phone about games and decorations that would make everything look picture perfect. That was when the secondary tension of the evening began to build. My husband turned to me directly and suggested with a gentle smile that I could handle the quieter parts, like coordinating the food setup while he and my younger sister took care of the more visible fun elements. It was phrased as teamwork as always, but the underlying message was clear. I felt the familiar pull to agree and keep the peace, yet something in me stayed quiet and observant, the self-assured part that had grown stronger through my work helping other families recognize their own unspoken patterns. The conversation continued, the patio lights casting long shadows across the table, and I realized how carefully the image of our happy family was being maintained even in these private moments. As the evening wound down and my parents left, my husband checked his phone one more time and mentioned that my younger sister had sent a group update about the plans. He forwarded it to me without looking closely, assuming it was just logistics. That was the moment the mistaken text conversation appeared on my screen, the one that had been intended for a smaller thread but somehow slipped into the larger family chat. It was a back and forth between my husband and my younger sister from earlier that day, the kind of exchange that laid bare the subtle alliance they had formed. My younger sister had written about how she appreciated my husband keeping things lively because some of us just did not have that natural spark, and my husband had replied with agreement, noting how my steady nature was great for the behind-the-scenes work. but that it was nice to have my younger sister's energy to balance it out for everyone else. The words were not shouted or dramatic, they were calm, almost affectionate in their own way. Yet they confirmed the invisible power dynamics that had been operating for months, the way they shaped the public perception of our family as this perfectly united front, while privately positioning me as the one who needed to stay in the supporting role. I sat there on the patio long after my husband had gone inside the fireworks, popping softly in the distance, and felt a peaceful clarity settle over me. This was not the explosive confrontation you see in movies. It was the quiet realization that the comparisons, the manipulated image of harmony, and the subtle alignments between my husband and my younger sister had been creating a dynamic that left me carrying the weight of keeping everything together without ever feeling fully seen. The mistaken forward had been unintentional, yet it opened the door to everything that would follow over the next weeks of the 4th of July break. The next morning, I woke to the soft hum of the neighborhood coming alive with the steady rhythm of summer break routines. I replayed the patio conversation and that unintended group chat preview in my mind while I made my usual pot of coffee, the calm light filtering through the kitchen window overlooking our quiet Indiana street. My husband had already left for an early errand, leaving a note about picking up more supplies for the upcoming family cookout. I sat at the counter with my mug, breathing in the peaceful stillness, and let the truth settle without rushing to any dramatic conclusions. The comparisons had always been there, woven so subtly into our daily life that they felt almost normal, but the mistaken forward from the night before had peeled back a layer showing how my husband and my younger sister worked together to shape this image of harmonious family unity that placed me in the supportive but less visible role. By midday, the neighborhood was buzzing with preparations for the 4th of July weekend. Our neighbor, Michael Hargrove, a retired teacher who lived 2 houses down and often joined our casual block gatherings, stopped by to borrow our extra folding table. He had known our family for years and always offered that steady, observant presence that made conversations feel grounded. As we set the table on the driveway, he mentioned how nice it was to see everyone pulling together for the holiday, then added thoughtfully that it seemed like my husband and my younger sister had been coordinating a lot of the plans lately. His comment was gentle without judgment, but it landed as another quiet confirmation that the pattern was visible to others, too. I smiled and kept my response light, thanking him for noticing yet. Inside, I felt that reflective clarity, deep in the kind that comes when you stop trying to explain away what you already sense is true. That afternoon, my aunt arrived from the next town over to help with some of the decorations, as she often did during these holiday breaks. My aunt had always been the one who listened more than she spoke, her presence a steady anchor in our extended family. She carried in a box of red, white, and blue streamers and gave me a warm hug, commenting on how peaceful our home looked compared to the busier streets closer to the city. We worked side by side in the backyard, stringing lights along the fence while the distant sound of neighborhood kids playing carried over the hedges. She asked how things were going with my husband and my younger sister, her tone casual but genuinely interested. I shared a bit about the coffee chat and the patio talk, keeping my words measured and truthful without exaggeration. My aunt nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful, and said she had noticed how the two of them often finished each other's sentences when planning these events, almost like they had their own little team dynamic. It was not accusatory, just an observation, and it reinforced the invisible power dynamics that had been operating beneath the surface of our carefully maintained family image. Later that evening, as the sky began to soften into twilight, my younger sister stopped by with a tray of homemade cookies she had baked for the gathering. She and my husband immediately fell into an easy conversation about the best way to arrange the yard games for the kids, their laughter floating across the patio like it always did. I listened from the kitchen window while finishing the salad prep, noting how seamlessly they aligned on every detail, positioning the more energetic activities as their domain, while suggesting I handle the quieter setup tasks. My husband glanced toward me with that familiar warm smile and said it was great that I was so reliable with the behind the scenes things, the kind of steady support that let the rest of the family shine. The words were spoken kindly, yet they carried the same subtle comparison I had heard so many times, the one that framed me as the dependable foundation, rather than an equal participant in the visible joy. The group chat, which had been the source of the mistaken forward, lit up again with updates about the holiday schedule. Messages from my husband and my younger sister dominated the thread, full of enthusiastic ideas for photos and activities that would make our family posts look perfectly united. I scrolled through them quietly, the peaceful detachment in my chest growing stronger as I recognized the pattern for what it was, a shared effort to curate this perception of harmony that relied on keeping me in the supportive shadows. My parents chimed in with approvals, and even my aunt added a few positive notes, but I could sense the subtle shift in how the narrative was being shaped. No one directly addressed the forwarded preview from the night before, as if ignoring it would keep the surface calm intact. Over the next couple of days, the preparations intensified in that unhurried Midwest way. Our neighbor Michael helped my husband set up the grill area one afternoon while I organized the cooler with drinks. He mentioned casually to me later, in that reflective, neighborly tone, that it was interesting how my husband always seemed to bounce ideas off my younger sister first, almost like they had an unspoken partnership. His observation was not gossipy, just honest, and it planted another small seed of validation without forcing any confrontation. I thanked him for his insight and continued my tasks, feeling the self-assured part of me grow steadier, the kind of inner wisdom that comes from years of helping others recognize their own family patterns through my work at the nonprofit. By the evening before the main holiday gathering, the backyard looked festive with the lights and tables arranged just so. My husband and my younger sister had spent the afternoon perfecting the playlist and game setup, their coordination effortless and public. When my younger sister teased me lightly about how I always made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes, my husband nodded in agreement, adding that it was one of the things he appreciated most about our marriage, the way I kept things balanced so the rest of the family could focus on the fun. The comment was delivered with affection, yet it landed as another layer of that invisible dynamic, the constant unfavorable comparisons that reinforce the manipulated image of our united front. I responded with a calm smile, acknowledging the compliment while feeling the peaceful truth settle deeper. Protecting my peace meant no longer absorbing those words as my full identity. That night, after everyone had left and the house grew quiet, another message appeared in the group chat. This one was from my younger sister to my husband alone, but it had been forwarded accidentally into the larger thread again, the same slip that had happened before. The preview showed her thanking him for always making her feel heard and energized, contrasting it gently with how some family members preferred a quieter approach that sometimes made events feel a bit flat. My husband had replied with a short note of agreement, keeping the tone light but affirming the distinction. I read it once, then set my phone down on the nightstand, the fireworks from a neighbor's yard popping softly in the distance. The evidence was accumulating not through dramatic revelations, but through these small, unintentional cracks in the curated narrative, each one highlighting the subtle alliance that had been shaping our family's public perception of unity. The following day brought the main neighborhood cookout, the streets alive with the scent of grills and the sound of laughter under the bright Indiana sun. Relatives and neighbors gathered in our backyard, the atmosphere warm and festive on the surface. My aunt arrived early and pulled me aside near the fence for a quiet moment, her voice low and reflective, as she shared that she had been noticing the same patterns in the group chats and conversations, the way my husband and my younger sister seemed to steer the family image together. She did not push for any big reaction, just offered her steady presence as a reminder that I was not imagining the invisible dynamics at play. Our neighbor Michael stopped by our table during the meal and offered a kind word about how well I managed the details that made these gatherings possible, his observation gentle yet pointed in its quiet support. As the afternoon unfolded with games and shared stories, the comparisons continued in those soft, almost affectionate ways. My husband would praise my younger sister's lively contributions in front of everyone, then turn to me with a smile and note how perfectly I kept the practical side running. The words blended into the holiday cheer, maintaining that polished image of family harmony, yet each one chipped away at the surface for me, revealing the deeper cost of staying in that supportive role. I moved through the gathering with calm self-assurance, engaging warmly with neighbors and relatives, but inside I felt the emotional freedom beginning to take root, the wisdom of protecting my peace, no longer just an idea, but a quiet guiding force. As the sun dipped lower and the sky took on that soft golden hue, my husband stood up near the grill to make a casual toast, his voice warm and familiar as it carried across the patio. He thanked everyone for coming, and then turned his gaze toward my younger sister, praising how her lively ideas had made the holiday feel special and engaging for the whole group. He added in that reflective tone he often used that it was wonderful to have someone with her energy balancing things out, especially when steadier approaches sometimes kept the focus more on the background details that made events like this possible. The words landed softly amid the clinking glasses and murmurs of agreement, the constant unfavorable comparisons woven in so naturally that they blended with the festive mood. My younger sister smiled brightly and chimed in, echoing how the family worked best when everyone contributed in their own way. The kind of alignment that reinforced the public perception of harmony we had all helped maintain for so long. I sat there with my plate in my lap, the peaceful detachment I had been cultivating, allowing me to observe without the old sting of needing to defend or explain myself. The invisible power dynamics felt clearer than ever in that moment, the way their words shaped the narrative around the table, positioning the family image as one of balanced support, while quietly framing my role as the reliable but less vibrant part. The conversation continued around us neighbors, sharing stories and passing dishes, but I noticed a few thoughtful glances from those who had been part of our circle for years. Then my aunt set her glass down and spoke up, her voice calm and steady, caring just enough to be heard without disrupting the gathering. She looked directly at me first, then addressed the group with quiet truthfulness, saying she had always admired how I brought a thoughtful steadiness to these family moments, the kind of presence that held space for everyone without needing to perform. She added that true unity came from seeing each person fully, not through comparisons that left anyone feeling less than. Her words hung in the warm evening air, a gentle but clear taking of my side that shifted the energy around the patio in subtle ways. My husband paused, his smile faltering for just a second before he recovered with a light laugh, brushing it off as everyone having their own perspective. My younger sister glanced between us, her expression tightening slightly as she changed the subject back to the upcoming fireworks display. The gathering continued, plates cleared, and games resuming, but the moment lingered like a quiet ripple in the surface calm. Relatives who had been active in the group chat earlier began responding less frequently. Over the next couple of days, their messages growing shorter and more neutral as the break wore on. Some neighbors mentioned in passing how refreshing it was to see different voices, heard their distance from the usual coordinated plans, a soft form of withdrawal that mirrored the growing awareness in our small circle. The manipulated perception of perfect family unity started to fray at the edges, not with loud arguments or dramatic exits, but through these small, accumulating spaces where people simply stepped back. In the days that followed the gathering, the invisible dynamics between my husband and my younger sister continued in their familiar pattern, their texts and planning still flowing easily as they prepared for a smaller family dinner toward the end of the break. I participated where it felt right, but I also began carving out quiet time for myself, reflecting on my work at the nonprofit and the families I helped navigate similar unspoken tensions. The emotional freedom after release came not in a single bold declaration, but in the peaceful choice to stop absorbing the comparisons as my full truth. I spoke with my husband one evening on the same patio where the mistaken text had first appeared, the string lights still up and the neighborhood quiet under a starry sky. My voice stayed even and reflective as I shared how the constant unfavorable comparisons and the curated image of unity had left me carrying an unseen weight, and that protecting my peace meant no longer participating in the dynamic the way I once had. He listened, his responses measured and familiar, acknowledging the conversation without fully shifting the patterns we had all lived within for years. My younger sister joined part of that talk later, her energy still bright as she suggested we could all just keep things light for the sake of the family image. I responded calmly that the image mattered less to me now than feeling truly seen in my own home and circle, and that blood relation did not automatically equal the kind of love that lifted everyone equally. The conversation ended without resolution or raised voices, just a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed. Over the final days of the break, the surface level family harmony we had worked so hard to maintain began to dissolve in gentle but irreversible ways. The group chat grew quieter with fewer coordinated posts and more individual check ins that no longer centered on presenting a united front. Relatives distanced themselves naturally, their engagement fading into polite but separate lives. The invisible power dynamics exposed enough that the polished perception could no longer hold without effort from all sides. I continued my days with the same steady routine, walking the neighborhood streets in the early mornings and finding deeper satisfaction in my nonprofit work, where helping others recognize their own family patterns now felt more personal and grounding. The emotional freedom after release settled into a quiet, empowered detachment, the wisdom of protecting my peace no longer a distant idea, but the foundation of how I moved forward. There was no dramatic cutoff or final confrontation that tied everything neatly. Instead, the unresolved tension lingered, like the faint smoke from the last fireworks, a reminder that some family dynamics shift without fully dissolving. My husband and my younger sister maintained their alignment in smaller ways, but the broader circle around us had pulled back the surface harmony lost in exchange for a more honest space where I no longer felt the need to fill every gap. Looking back now, months after that 4th of July break, I sit in the same quiet kitchen with my coffee and feel grateful for the clarity that came through those unintentional messages and gentle observations from my aunt and our neighbor. The experience taught me that protecting your peace is wisdom, especially when blood relation does not equal love, and the image of unity can sometimes mask the quieter costs beneath. I choose myself now in small daily ways, and that choice has brought a peaceful freedom that no curated family narrative could ever replace. Thank you for listening to my story.